One. Hello and welcome to the Rotary eClub of Silicon Valley. My name is Mitty Chang and I am president for this club for just a few more weeks. Every week we bring to you a new program about education, technology, innovation, and humanitarian service. It is my honor to introduce a couple of members we have on the call, and one of our members is actually going to introduce our guest speaker, so I'll hold off on that in a little bit. But first, I'd like to introduce at the bottom left of my screen, as I see it, our resident Canadian in the room right now. Chris, if you'd like to wave hi to everyone. So that's Chris Cochran. Chris is on our board of directors. He's a charter member, but he is also an award-winning independent video production and writing wizard, a director, a producer, many other things. Also, just all-around cool guy. Above Chris, we have our charter president and immediate past president, because we're a relatively new club, Rushton Hurley. Rushton is in the education space. He's been an educator, a principal, a Japanese teacher, a cat lover, a lot of other things. And right now he is currently executive director and founder of Next Vista for Learning. And they create some very cool videos for teachers and students. Rushton will be introducing our guest speaker. So Rushton, I'd like to turn to you. And then I know viewers, we have a little bit different kind of format today, and Rushton's going to explain it to you.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you very much for taking part in our meeting this week. It is always our interest to see what we can do to inspire people. So, as you go through our meeting, you see these different pieces of information, short videos, stuff that makes you stop and go, and to that end, our goal is to connect with really fascinating people around the world and have them as speakers so that we're getting the kind of ideas that stick in our head and make us begin to look at the world in new ways, all of this kind of thing. So our speaker today is somebody that I met via the Rotary club that I was in before Chris and Mitty and I launched this club, and several other folks, of course. But that previous club, the Rotary eClub of the Southwest USA, good set of folks. Like any club, you encounter people that make you go, whoa, wow, wait, that's so interesting. And one of those people for me in that club is Francine Hardaway. She is our guest today. She is as someone who has been watching the path of innovation in the technology and healthcare sectors for a couple of decades. She's one of the founders of Stealthmode Partners and has always all kinds of cool, interesting things to say. I get it daily. Why? Because you call her every day? No. Actually, that's because she has a curated newsletter of stuff that she's reading. And what'll happen is these things are put out by all sorts of people. The difference with Francine's is I read that one. And so she's identified these really interesting articles, and there's a title, and I'll see that, and then there's a blurb, but under that are her comments. That's where I go after I read the title to know whether I need to bother reading this part, because I feel like I learn something every time it happens. So it is a joy to have Francine come and talk to us. She's going to be interviewed by me and all three of us from the club as we kind of pepper her with questions about the different things she might say. And I'll start with this. Francine, as we met via Rotary, and as entrepreneurship is this thing that you have studied and been part of for so long, what do you see as the relationship between entrepreneurship and service?
Actually, Rotary has been around, as you know, for many, many years, and a lot of people use Rotary as a way of networking at the same time as they performed community service. And now we have an entire generation, the millennials, who feel very strongly about service. And I think the relationship between entrepreneurship and service is like true entrepreneurship wants to change the world, and that kind of world changing comes from having a service component to the problem that you're solving. Entrepreneurs are problem solvers.
That's awesome. The opportunities that I think we have within Rotary to identify problems and do something about them. I think that's one of the reasons people stop and say, I'll give time to Rotary. And especially because we get more and more creative about problems that seem more and more difficult to address, that's where opportunities begin to.
You mean like the worldwide vaccination of all children against polio? That?
Exactly. The idea that we can actually eradicate a disease and to leverage, 1.2 million Rotarians around the world in some fashion to make it happen. It's pretty bold stuff.
A lot of Rotarians travel around the world.
I think traveling is the kind of thing that keeps us from being able to be too insular in our thinking.
Right.
Without a doubt. Now, as your interest in part is technology, are there particularly promising technologies that are out there right now that you look at and you say, I am really intrigued by what's happening in, with this idea or with this kind of resource or anything like that?
There are a slew of technologies for transforming healthcare, just a veritable slew of them. Obviously, healthcare is broken in the United States. It's also broken in other countries where they have no health insurance whatsoever. And entrepreneurship has typically been the way that things have changed. For instance, I've had a client in India for over 10 years, and these guys started call centers for Ayurvedic medicine, where they started out actually by giving women in rural villages cell phones and letting anybody with symptoms, pay a small fee to use the cell phone and call the call center full of Ayurvedic physicians in Delhi. And now they have 60 clinics all over India, mainly in small towns and rural areas. And what they do is they've got a staff of doctors on call who take symptoms, make their best guess at a diagnosis, send out some prescription if that's applicable, and follow up with the patients. And they have data from something like 1 million people in India who have used Ayurvedic medicine. So they're segueing from, help get healthcare to rural villages, to help get people into clinics, to mine this data and find out what the biggest health problems are in India and try to fix those. And that to me is entrepreneurship with a huge service component.
It seems like when we look at what's happening in under-resourced areas and in places like many parts of India, that need that is there is driving thinking in such a way that allows people to stop and go, there's a way we can deal with this, right?
Yeah, and you know what? It's much harder to deal with in the United States because we have this, and this is my rant about healthcare in the United States. Most everybody says we have the best healthcare in the world. I know from having done healthcare work and startup health investing for years, I happen to know that is not true. That we have worse outcomes for more money spent, and we charge people a lot of money, and very often we do the wrong thing. We do unnecessary things, but it's very hard to change the American healthcare system because we're over-resourced. We have entrenched groups who have vested interests and don't want anyone new to come in and dislodge them. So if you're really going to try out something, chances are you will try it out in India, because in India it will be welcome. And as a result, many countries that we used to call developing countries end up having better healthcare and better outcomes than we do. So yeah, healthcare is a part of entrepreneurship opportunity that still needs to be addressed, and it's right in flux right now, right in the middle of being disrupted. But it's very hard to disrupt healthcare because you're dealing with people's lives, and it really isn't like, starting a social network.
Well,
but we got the best entrepreneurs are working in healthcare and in biotech in genetics and genomics and epigenomics and by human biome, just all of those, what we lump under the category body hacking.
And so, there's this kind of large scale way of thinking about changes in healthcare. And then there's just kind of what's happening in the small scale, right? I think of all these people down in San Diego, the Imperial Valley, who, when they need something done, in terms of a medical procedure, they go to Mexico.
Right. Medical tourism is the end result of the combination of what we've done in the United States and how they've tried other things in other countries and made them work better than they work here. Because again, no vested interests.
The standard reaction to that is, oh yeah, it's cheaper. It's like, they're good. Right? I mean, these are good doctors because
no. I've known people not only who've gone to Mexico, but I've known people who've gone to Thailand and India for hip replacements and heart surgery. And, that would stun the average American. But the truth is that it costs 1/10 of the cost, and the outcomes are the same or better. It's very interesting. There's a lot the American public needs to learn about healthcare. And as I say, that's my rant. And I'm trying to encourage every entrepreneur I can think of to get going on trying to fix this absolutely huge and costly problem.
Well, we have somebody from the other side of the other border, right? And so, I'm guessing that Chris, as you think about some of these things, you're thinking about, I see this all the time as people come in buses over the border into Canada in order to be able to, buy prescription drugs cheaper or whatever it may be. Is that something?
Yeah, prescription drugs are about I wouldn't say 1/10, at least 50% less than buying the same drug in the United States. And you're paying Canadian dollars.
And I probably shouldn't say this, but I do that.
Well, yeah.
I'll probably be arrested, but
Okay, now where I am, we get supposed free healthcare. It's usually very good. But in my wife's case, as an example, she needed a specialist with a back situation. And the guy here just couldn't do it right. There was just no way. So we looked around. We went to Cuba.
Well,
Cuba was an amazing system. And it's totally free.
Right, and
as a Canadian, I can go there without, consequences, without getting, my wrist slapped or told I'm a bad person or anything like this. But I was amazed. Just absolutely amazed. The doctors are first class. The hospitals have everything you could ever want. My wife works in the operating room of a hospital here, and she said she saw stuff in Cuba that she's heard of, but they haven't got yet.
And that is because we have, and I don't want to politicize this too much, but we have regulatory agencies that keep those things from us. Because yes, Cuba, yes, Mexico. I once fell on a glass bottle when I was at a yoga retreat in Maya Tulum. So I ended up having to go to a clinic in Playa del Carmen, which is, not exactly Manhattan. And I watched the guy sew up my hand, and there were so many things that I know would never happen in the United States, like he was smoking while he did it, and and I have no scar. I mean, and I had no infection. I also once went to India for we're getting off entrepreneurship. I'll get back to it in a minute, but friend of mine who had a tremendous commitment, a former Intel employee, had a tremendous commitment to India, which was where he was born, started at an eye camp at an ashram in Bihar, which is the poorest province of India. And he took me down there to see the eye camp. And what it was thousands, literally thousands of Indians squatting in line in a dirt field, waiting to get into a sterile tent to have their cataracts removed. And they did them, they were doing like 20 minutes of procedure. American doctors had come down to give service, to donate their time and volunteer. And they never, at least at the time that I was last there, they had never had an infection. So, I mean, it's really possible to do things in new ways, but if you are an entrepreneur, you think about that. And if you are not an entrepreneur, you think everything has to stay the way it is. And I think that is, I told you I'd get it back to entrepreneurship.
Well, when I begin to think along those lines, you know, this is kind of the right audience in many ways. You think about a Rotarian audience, we think about charities and service to others and all that, but service to others does not have to simply be charity, right? When you think about the work that the medicine program you were talking about, the call program that you were talking about in India, that's sustainable, right? That's not based on people in any given country deciding that they'll take a few days of their life to go help somebody else somewhere else, which is great. But if you can create a system where,
that's a business. That is a sustainable business. Yeah. It's a corporate structure. There's no question. And they actually have a pharmacy, and they compound their own herbs for the Ayurvedic prescriptions. And they've got an income stream from that too. They've got an income stream from the phone doctor visits and the clinic visits, and they've got an income stream from the prescriptions, and they also have another income stream from Americans who come over and stay at their ashrams and clinics to learn about Ayurveda and yoga.
Wow. So you've been following entrepreneurship for decades, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, this is not something you've kind of come to lately.
I was interested in entrepreneurship before entrepreneurship was cool, because I was an entrepreneur before accelerators and incubators and mentors and all of that, where you totally did it by the seat of your pants and didn't know what you were doing, and there was nobody to ask. So yeah, I've been following it for a long time.
And in doing so, if you've seen, these kinds of processes going, you just mentioned several different, pieces of how things are happening now, whether it's incubators trying to help out, companies get going, which itself is its own, kind of interesting revenue model. Are there things happening right now, like in the last couple of years or so, that you would say are particularly fascinating for what they might mean for supporting young companies?
Actually, probably the opposite. Because what's happening now that I think is not in the interest of young companies is there's a tremendous amount of money, especially in Silicon Valley, floating through the system trying to invest in early stage ideas. And what is going to happen is that much of that money, which is dumb money, is going to get burned, and it's going to retreat. And that's not going to help entrepreneurs. Too much money never helps entrepreneurs. It doesn't make them understand what it's like to make a business sustainable. It does make them grow faster. That's true. But it doesn't give them a sense of what it's like to have a sustainable business. And that's why there was the dot-com bust, where all of those companies without sustainable business models just went away.
Well, that idea that struggle is important, right? If you're going to come up with an idea.
No, responsibility is important. You'll struggle anyway, whether you have money or not, because it's very, very hard to start a business. But responsibility is important, and a sense of entitlement is the opposite of important. And a lot of young entrepreneurs now have not been through a dry period, and they think they are entitled to money to get their business off the ground. And I love it when they come to me, because I've done a lot of angel investing, and probably too much, because I would be rich if I hadn't. And And, people always come to me and that I don't know from Adam. And they say to me, would you look at my deck and are you interested in investing? And I'm like, you've got to be kidding. You don't understand. This is my personal money. Would you take me out to dinner without knowing anything about me? And they're like, well, no. And I say, well, then why should I invest in you? Your deck means nothing. Your deck bears almost no relation to reality because it's really who you are and how you react to challenges and how you overcome adversity. And whether your wife is willing to stay with you or whether, something like that, all these things happen. And so I have to know, if I'm going to invest in you, I have to know who you are and how you respond to all kinds of things. And by the way, that's why, the big unfairness rap that people have, people only invest in people they know, and they only invest in people who've always been successful. Well, that's why. Because, if you know someone, you can at least vouch for their character. They're not going to take your money and go to Bolivia. And if you know somebody, you're going to know that, when their child was sick, they stayed up all night and didn't just, abandon ship and let the child cry. So you got to really know the people that you're investing in.
Yeah, ideas can only go as far as a good work ethic will take them, I'm sure.
Ideas are nothing. Ideas are nothing. It's markets and teams that are everything. Ideas are a dime a dozen. And I've now seen, like you talk about talking to entrepreneurs for 20 years. I've listened to so many pitches that I have heard every idea several times. It's like you're not pitching me something I have never heard before.
Yeah. So
I'm like, oh yeah, I saw that 3 years ago and I think it went out of business.
Yeah, you're so true. It's who you're buying, not what you're buying.
Really?
I find that in my business why we have longevity, because people buy my team. Period.
Exactly. They buy your customer service. They
buy the team. Yes, we've done everything, but that's irrelevant. It's who you are,
right,
and your track record, and about who am I buying? Who's doing this?
That's absolutely right. I had a large tech marketing business and I sold it to Intel 20 years ago. And I've been consulting to entrepreneurs for the last 20 years. Well, people that were my clients in the tech marketing business are now sending their sons and daughters to me for advice. I actually had the grandchild of one of my first clients come to me for advice. And that is buying the team. That's like, these people are buying the team. They don't even care what I'm doing. They don't know if I said, this is the service I sell to entrepreneurs, they wouldn't know or care or think about it. They are buying me, and they're buying, I always like to joke about it. I'm selling wisdom and mistakes.
Actually,
or maybe I should put it the other way around, mistakes and wisdom.
So I'm curious, what do you say to the grandson of a client, who might be, all of 20 or something years old in that area? What do you say when they say, okay, I'm here for advice?
What kind of advice? What do you want to do? Where do you expect to be 5 years from now? Do you have an idea for a company? What is it? Have you Googled it? Have you tested it out? The thing I find with the really younger entrepreneurs, the grandchildren, is that they don't even Google things. In fact, some of the not so young entrepreneurs, they do not do any competitive research. Not even. It's so amazing because we used to have to do focus groups. We used to have to do all this stuff to get competitive information. Now you get competitive information by Googling, who else is selling XYZ. Well,
we have a one step up on them, because remember, we got our education like don't know if this applies to Mitty, but the other on this call got her
Mitty
education before Google. We had to go to a library.
Exactly.
And go through a card catalog and
that's right.
Spend hours looking something up.
That's right. And so the idea that you can use Google and find out just about anything to figure out whether your business idea has any traction, you can get free market research, like you can ask the question, how many people use umbrellas? You can ask the question, what percentage of the United States is vegan? Whatever your idea is, you can find out some market research to tell you market size.
Speaking of research and information and libraries, as I mentioned before, one of the reasons that I stay in touch with you, or at least you stay on my radar, is because of this newsletter you put out.
So this newsletter started out as like an experiment. A friend of mine, the same guy who started Friendster, Jonathan Abrams, started a site called Nuzzle. And what Nuzzle does is present you with the news that your Facebook friends or your Twitter followers share most often. And so I was, reading on Nuzzle and reading the news that my Twitter and Facebook friends recommended. And all of a sudden I saw that Jonathan was starting a newsletter, trying it out, beta testing it. And he wrote me an email and said, do you want to be a beta tester of my newsletter? Well, if someone says to me, do you want to be a beta tester of you can fill in the blank, I'll do it. So I started this Nuzzle newsletter. And sure enough, people started reading it. And when I first started it, it's just auto-curated. But then when I realized people were reading it, I was like, oh, holy Toledo, I better really invest some effort into this because people are actually reading this thing. So that's how I got the idea of not just taking the 10 items Nuzzle recommended. And this happened during the election. I was like, you know what? Everyone can get all the Trump news they want. So when I started it out, I was like, I'm not putting any Trump news in this thing. So I would like fish through news of other things where it wasn't just full of Trump news. And then I got the idea a little bit. So that was the first thing. People said, oh, we really like that. And then people started writing back to me and saying, well, what do you think? And so then I decided that I was going to write 1 or 2 sentences about every article that I chose. It's still 10 articles, from the news media. Every article and give a little comment to tell you whether you should read it, whether it's a long read and, you might have to save it for the weekend, why I think you should read it, why it's different from something you'd get. So that now I do that. Well, so it's totally become fun.
Well, one of the, it was a few days ago, one of the things that you put in your little blurb about the read was something along the lines of, you must take time to read this. And I thought, she would not say that if it weren't the case. And the article was from The Atlantic, My Family's Slave by Alex Tizon.
Right. It was about a guy who realized long after his parents died that his parents had held a slave, a woman who came with him from the Philippines. And when his parents died, the slave woman had never been out on her own, and she had really nowhere to go. And so he inherited the slave. And because the slave, and he keeps calling her a slave, it makes me feel really sad, but he really had to come to grips with this. The slave didn't know anything else to do but serve him. And so even after she was old and sick and everything, she would continue, doing the laundry, cooking the meals, doing all of these things because that was the only thing that she did. And it was very long, but it was the most touching thing. And it freaked out the writer, which is why he wrote it, because, you know, he did not think of himself as the type of person, you know, hip American 21st century guy who had a slave. But if you really take the definition, someone who, you know, emigrated against her will and lived in your house and performed tasks and did not receive
paid. Right.
Yeah. That's a slave.
And it's one of the most powerful things I have read in all.
Go find it. My Family's Slave. It's so completely worth reading.
The Atlantic, and the guy's name is Tizon, Tizon. Tragically, he, the writer, passed away a few months after submitting the story, the decision to publish it, or something like this. He died young, like 54 or something.
Yeah, right. I have a feeling that he was sick when he wrote it and submitted it, because that's the only way you could reveal so much about your family, and, you know, it's a lot of sensitive information.
Powerful stuff. So in terms of the kinds of questions that I could ask you, we could go all day. And so I want to make sure, I want to make sure we're honoring everybody's time there too. So Mitty, I mean, I think we've hit about our 30-minute mark on this, but, you know, how do you want to wind things down? And what do you want to toss in for Francine?
Yeah, Francine, I was just looking at some of the work that you do, and then some of the portfolio companies that are in your investment group, and I was really interested in hearing what are some of the stories or advice that you would maybe give to some of these young entrepreneurs that are out there and watching this video. I know that you've already mentioned it's really a relationship game, right? And right. Building that relationship and wining and dining someone is just as important as if you would to go on a date with someone, and that absolutely makes sense to me.
What you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess maybe some people would love to hear some advice about, you know, how do you intro them? How does one intro themselves to you usually? Is that, do you usually get folks who cold call you or cold email you?
Well, I don't generally answer that, nor do any investors. Mostly you have to know someone who knows someone. So what I would say to most entrepreneurs is you have to go out and network in your community. And that's where the co-working spaces are so good, you know, because if you work in your own house or even a Starbucks, you probably won't meet other entrepreneurs. And other entrepreneurs have other contacts. So a co-working space co-working, I think, has been, now I'm going back to answering your question that I didn't answer the first time around. What's really helpful to entrepreneurs? Co-working. You know, places where you can bounce ideas off and meet other entrepreneurs who have similar problems and different contacts.
Cool. I will find. Awesome. We had a program some time ago from someone who had started a co-working space, and I'll find that link so that we can get it below the embed of the video for this program.
Was it WeWork by any chance?
No, it was not WeWork. I mean, I think they're the big kahuna in the co-working.
Yeah.
Right. But she was developing something a little different. She was in the Chicago area. I'll pull up that link and share it for sure. So for everyone who has joined us this week, you know, you can see why we do this. This is the opportunity that we get to meet these really interesting people anywhere. And to have these kinds of conversations with them, you know, why would we be on the recording if we can just watch it later? Because after the recording stops, we get to keep talking with these people, right? And so it's this wonderful opportunity to be intrigued and inspired by people who are doing fascinating things everywhere. And so, Francine,
or know people who are doing fascinating.
Well said. Exactly. You know, I mean, the networking is within the Rotary space, even in an online club, for sure. Right. So thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for taking your time to share your ideas. Francine, you are
my pleasure.
Welcome back. I mean, for, you know, anytime you're like, I need to get back into the Rotary thing, as well, we got the club for you.
I've been a Rotarian twice, once in the old school type of Rotary and once in the eClub.
Yeah. Well, we like to think we're pushing boundaries and
yeah, we're a little different. Yeah.
All good. And so with that,
well, I love this technology for the meetings. Zoom is such a great technology.
Yeah, Mitty brought Zoom to us as
a tremendous idea, Mitty. Very clever.
Absolutely. So Mitty, anything you want to do to finish things off before we close down the recording?
No, just want to remind everyone to leave a comment below the video in the comments section, and we appreciate your time. And Francine, do you have any last words for us before we say goodbye to everyone?
Sure. Go to nuzzle.com/Francine Hardaway and subscribe to my Nuzzle newsletter.
We'll get that link in.
I don't make any money, but you might enjoy it.
That's awesome. And we'll have a link below this video. Thank you so much, Francine. Thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you guys next week. Take care now.